Сама себе, потому что я знаю, где. Надо еще что-то написать. Ладно, я туда рискую, все это напишу. Сама кофе, видишь, как бы вообще никакого. Что я образование смотрю? Ничего, когда я образование. Болды. Я был бы рад угнать велосипед. Педолосов. Свольный. Велосипед. Бритой. Шавина. Шаверма это. А, с движением, понятно. Полик. Ну чё? Не побивает, чё ты? Дед Бурбатов. Endless payment suite. Так. Рубеж, что такое? Endless payment suite sliver. Возможно, да? Куда-нибудь возьму, говорит. Не надо. нет, народ. Ну trust nobody. Расщепление. Нет, ты поймешь, что там. Ты не понимаешь. нет, наоборот. Да нафиг надо, иди в жопу, блин, да нет. Да наоборот. В чем проблема-то? Что ты лезешь? Собирай голову. Так нельзя писать, говорит, да, вот это не туда. Зачем? Разбираться даже не буду, говорит. Они умные очень, такие умные, как кавагеровье. я не понимаю, почему здесь это. Ну нет, наоборот, наоборот. Где? Вот на, вот это не вижу. Чё это? Что такое, а? Ты издеваешься, что ли? Ты как? А, ну нет, я Кощей, типа, нет, это Кощеево царство. уничтоженный, человек уничтоженный просто. Не знаю, значит, нахрен нужен нахрен. Это он себе так говорит. Очень интересно. Я звук, я не слышу. Не комит. Наоборот, слишком много каких-то правил уже было. Да, там ничего нет. Рохля. Все считают его злым, просто это единственное. И в чем проблема твоя? Врача. Проверься. Куда провериться? Куда провериться? Кого провериться? Что такое? Да ты чё?
Hey video creators, with Envato Elements you can create better videos. How? With unlimited downloads of millions of creative assets, all with commercial licenses for one low cost. Because no matter which video you're creating, Envato Elements has everything you need. Get creative with unlimited downloads of royalty-free stock footage, video templates, audio, and millions of other creative assets.
All right, people, let's move on. So this is where Mike stands, and this is where the dinosaur comes in.
Yeah, Envato Elements is where you find and download everything. Motion graphics, dinosaurs, and create even more with social media assets, online content, everything.
Everything. Literally everything.
Music tracks, sound effects. Thank you. Everything you need for your videos, it's all unlimited. Deliver better videos faster with Envato Elements. Get started today.
If I don't want to make a video like this of myself, I can just make a really cute one of caricature with me.
This is a day in the life of a mangaka.
勉強はしましたね。一応ってことないですね。教えてもらって。
So he did learn in school, but he believes he learned more and more as he worked with various publishing editors over time. And what was your first paid job, and how much was it?
一番最初の仕事は読み切り会議を通して。
50, and the color title page was about double that. Draft.
Very, very simple, but it takes a lot of dedication. And I think the staff doesn't come in until 10, so...
Hey, did you hear the assistant called Reiji? Sensei? Which means teacher in Japanese. It's typical for assistants and editors.
はい、じゃあ色を。
It's also interesting that each of them use different drawing tools. I guess it really depends on each mangaka and what makes them feel comfortable when they draw. Did you work as a... How did you find this job?
担当さん
を使ってっていう感じで現状を生かしてはいますかね。
So it looks like all 4 staff have already arrived. While they're here, let's ask them a few questions to see how their jobs are like.
How long have you been working here?
アシスタント多分2、3年ぐらい
How did you find this job?
担当さんに紹介してもらってって感じです。
How about you?
1年目でどうする
How did you find this job?
賞をもらって上京しないかって言われた時に担当さんが宮島先生のとこ紹介してくれて
Do you have Rensai?
ネームっていうの書いて連載取れるようにやってますね。
So what I'm finding that's different than most offices is that they actually talk a lot of the time while they're working. For some people that might be the perfect job.
So Reiji's 2 male assistants have actually got the Rensai, and usually when this happens, assistants quit to start off on their own, but both have decided to continue to work with Reiji, which says a lot. But let's see, is Reiji a good boss?
言わされてるから。本当にやめたくないくらい本当に居心地いいんですよね。
Yay! Finally, lunchtime! He often goes to lunch with his assistants, but since it's a nice day, he's gonna take his dog for a walk in the park, while also grabbing a small lunch.
Россия – самая большая страна в мире. Эти 17 миллионов квадратных километров таят в своих недрах множество ресурсов. Все это является достоянием жителей страны. Главным же из списка являются огромные запасы нефти и природного газа. Российская транснациональная корпорация «Газпром» занимает лидирующие места среди всех топливно-энергетических компаний во всем мире. Ежегодно объемы «Газпром» достигают 500 миллиардов кубометров газа. Это составляет 20% от всей добычи газа в мире, что позволяет «Газпром» быть самым крупным поставщиком газа на Ближнем Востоке. Такие объемы ежегодно приносят компании выручку, превышающую 5 триллионов рублей. Это позволяет «Газпрому» реализовывать такие проекты, как «Северный поток-2», проект «Ямал», «Лахта-центр» в Санкт-Петербурге и многие другие. А как же мы? Ведь ресурсы России – это достояние всех жителей страны. 3 ноября 2019 года, после долгих дискуссий в Государственной Думе, был принят закон о введении проекта микроинвестирования в «Газпром». Проще говоря, дать доступ к заработку на проектах «Газпром» рядовому гражданину России. Речь речь идет отнюдь не о выплатах всем 144 миллионам жителей страны. Закон всего лишь предусматривает систему микроинвестирования. Допустим, вы инвестируете в проекты «Газпром Инвест» $150. К концу недели ваша прибыль вырастет до $220. Представьте, если вы...
So lunch hasn't finished yet. It's still about 10 to 15 minutes before lunch is over. And it looks like all of them are back here. They're using their own free time to work on their own manga.
So, what are you working on now?
これからは原稿の続きをしますね。でもキャラペンって言ってキャラクターのペンがもうある程度終わったので、ここからは自分の描ける背景を描いちゃったりとか、スタッフさんたちに貼ってもらうトーンの指定を入れていく。
I think it's like just a little after 1. They're pretty much going to be doing this the rest of the day until 6 o'clock. So let me just take a little bit of time and explain how kind of this whole mangaka thing works.
Since his manga appears in a weekly magazine, he has a 1-week production cycle. He meets publishers, decide the plot on Monday, works on the final sketch on Tuesday, finishes the Genko final draft with his plot on Monday, works on the final sketch on Tuesday, finishes the Genko final draft with his assistants on Wednesday, and from Thursday through Sunday, he works on drafting and creating the story for the next name, as well as gathering information like taking photos for backgrounds, and then back to the publisher meeting on Monday.
20ページ入ります。1ページ確認お願いします。
はい。鍵ないですね。
Okay, that was the first time he moved from his desk during work hours. You just witnessed the biggest action scene at a mangaka. So what do you advise people to do who want to become a mangaka?
もう今すぐ漫画を描くことですね。
He says that the manga industry is short with assistants, so if artists have a set of skills, maybe that person can contact a publisher or mangaka directly for a job. He thinks it's important to keep trying to submit your manga to publishers or other manga websites like Pixiv, and also to find your own unique strength that can compete with existing popular mangaka. Look, he uses women's magazines as a reference for female characters, and he even pulls out his heroine Mizuhara's outfit from the fashion magazine Ray. Interesting.
So we're reaching the end of the day, and it looks like the manga is actually starting to come together. You can see that the pictures are starting to get filled out, you can see the tone. So they have to actually finish all of it today and send it to the publisher.
Have you and your assistants finished the Genko?
はい、終わります。
I mean all of it?
完全に終わりますね。はい。お疲れです。また後で。はい、また後で。
Reiji usually goes straight to dinner with his staff after work, but today he has an irregular meeting with his editors, so he's joining a bit afterwards. So instead of having the weekly meeting at the office, Reiji prefers to meet with a publisher at an izakaya restaurant so they can eat and drink while they discuss the next episode.
はい、生を軟骨の盛り合わせがお一つでございますね。はい、かしこまりました。ありがとうございます。失礼いたします。
Les gens essaient souvent de changer leur monde tout en restant les mêmes. Ce n'est pas possible.
はい、お疲れ様です。お疲れ様です。お願いします。すいません、お待たせしました。いえいえ、失礼しました。おえー、出た。やば。すげえ、あ、エースが表紙なんですね。そうです。はい、お疲れ様です。よろしくお願いします。お疲れ様です。年もお疲れ様でした。はい。とりあえず先週分がもう割と年もお疲れ様でした。はい。とりあえず先週分がもう割と大丈夫ですか？いただいたも。
By the way, Reiji is sitting at the furthest location from the door, which is called Kamiza in Japanese. It's a top seat within the room, meaning the seat of honor, and the seat closest to the door is called Shimoza, which is the lowest seat. It dates back to the samurai days when would-be attackers came through the door. Usually the first person killed would be the person closest to the door with their back turned. In Japanese business culture, people still decide where to sit and stand based on this seating rule, and the Kamizama and Shimoza also apply to car seats and elevators as well. Nice, Reiji is finally finished with the publisher meeting and is now joining dinner with his assistants. Gathering itself is called uchiage in Japanese, which means to drink and celebrate an event. In their case, the finishing of this week's episode.
Alright, so that's the day in the life of a Japanese mangaka. What did you guys think? Let me know in the comments. If you like this video, help me out and hit the like button. So if you want to check out Reiji's social media as well as links to his manga, I'll leave that in the description, so definitely check that out. If you want to see what I'm doing on the daily, then definitely check out my Instagram account. If you want to help support the channel, check out the Tokyo merch. If you like these day in the life videos, then I've actually produced several videos already. Maybe I think this is like the 7th or 8th one. And if you've seen all of those, then don't worry, I have a lot more coming. So definitely hit the subscribe button and the bell button, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.
What if I told you that you can target the exact person that you're looking for, the dream client that you're chasing day to day? What if they instead found you right here on social media through Facebook and Instagram ads? You don't believe me, huh? Okay. My name is Gubaev, and I'm not from here. I'm from the struggle world just like you. And I used to work in corporate America. My job, believe it or not, was to sell television commercials. Go figure. I helped hundreds of Fortune 500 companies scale their businesses to the moon and
что я ходил, ничего не записано, наоборот.
This is a day in the life of a Japanese space engineer. This is Takashi, 32 years old with a wife and son living in Tokyo, and he's just waking up for work. This is Takashi's wife, Haruka. She works full-time as an IT consultant, and since both of them work full-time, which is becoming more common in Japan these days, they help each other out with the morning chores. Like she prepares breakfast while Takashi takes care of her son. So the first thing Takashi does every morning is to pack his son's bag for hoikuen, which is Japanese for nursery school. His son is 4 years old and attends nursery school on the weekdays while Takashi and Haruka work. Oh, and that's his son, Kei-kun. His name is Kei, but the word kun is usually attached to the end of a Japanese boy's name. Oh wow, it seems like he has a lot of energy this morning. In Japan, there's an old custom called Teishu Kanpaku, which basically means a husband madly rules the household, but I guess Takashi's family is not the case. Gender equality is becoming more acknowledged in Japan as younger families tend to help each other out, like them. Oh, he's being the Otoban-san. At his nursery, only one person is selected each day to be responsible for making sure everyone gets food before eating. He loves the job, so when at home, he wants to do it all the time. Oh no, I think he's freestyling it now. He Even on a busy weekday morning, they make time to have breakfast together, as the rest of the day is spent away from each other. You always eat bread for breakfast?
そうですね。ほぼパンですね。パン1枚とヨーグルトとあとハムか。
While Takashi's wife is helping Keikun finish breakfast, Takashi tidies up the room and puts away the Japanese futon into the oshiire, a traditional Japanese closet specifically designed for futon. Believe it or not, about 47% of the population in Japan sleep on a futon, meaning half the country sleep on the floor. Countries like Japan with limited space in the house are able to maximize the floor space by putting away the Japanese-style mattress in the morning in order to repurpose the space for the day. Would you be able to sleep on the floor in your country? Now it's time to help Keikun to change into his day wear. Oh nice, he has his own style. I like it. Before Takashi goes to work, it's his job to take Keikun to Hoikuen. Buckle up, Keikun. So Takashi rides an electric Japanese mamachari style bike to take Keikun to nursery school. It's super common for most families with children in Tokyo, since many don't own cars but still need a way to transport their kids back and forth when trains and buses are not an option. Now, he's ready to go to work. Taking care of his son before work is sometimes a hustle, but he enjoys every minute of it. Takashi commutes to work by train, just like most everyone else in Tokyo. For him, it's 1 hour door-to-door with one train transfer in between, which is pretty average in Tokyo. He uses the commute time to check his urgent work emails and review reports from last night. Takashi, like many other Japanese, use the commute time to be efficient, like reading up on news or studying new language on their smartphone. But of course, there are many others that use the time to catch up on their sleep. I'm back with another day in the life. It is super hot outside, but we're doing this anyway. Takashi's train should be arriving right now. There it is. Good morning. What time did you go to sleep last night? It's super hot today, isn't it? Oh wow, you can see Tokyo Skytree from here. That's pretty dope. It's almost 10 a.m. Are you late?
大丈夫です。会社の裁量労働制でしてタスクで時間が決まってるっていう形です。
So Takashi works as a space engineer at Astroscale, a growing venture company with about 80 employees in the Tokyo headquarters. They are one of the only companies who develop satellite technologies to clean up debris in space, even partnering with JAXA, Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, for missions. Takashi normally works at his own desk with monitors, but because of COVID-19, he prefers to sit at the lounge when he comes to the office. In fact, these days, 70 to 80% of the Tokyo office are working from home on any given day. Takashi also works from home most days, but there are times like today where he needs to work on hardware, which requires him to be physically in the office. So what are you working on right now?
午後のですね、打ち合わせの準備ですね。軌道上のロケットのアッパーステージを捕まえに行く。 宇宙ロボットの検討をやっているんですけども、そこでちょっと技術的な課題が見えてきたので、その全貌をどう整理していくか、コンセプトをどう作っていくかという議論をしています。じゃあ打ち合わせやりましょう。
Now he's attending a weekly internal meeting. Every member updates what's going on with each project. Currently, they're working on a project called ELSA-D, short for End of Life Services by Astroscale Demonstration. A spacecraft designed to remove failed satellites from orbit, kind of like a car removal service in space, and it's scheduled to launch later this year. Now they're heading. heading to the clean room to work on the ELSA-D satellites. Before entering the clean room, Takashi needs to suit up to minimize the chances of introducing outside debris and dust, which could impact the operation of the satellites and even alter their testing results. And as a final precaution, he gets into the air shower to remove any remaining debris or dust on the suits.
So they just went inside of the clean room. Unfortunately, I can't go inside myself, but here's some footage that it would look like inside.
Oh, they're back! So what did you guys do in there? Oh, they're back! So what did you guys do in there?
スイッチのテストをしてまして、対象を捕まえるものを作ってるんですけども、それをちゃんと捕まえたというのを、判定するテスト、判定するスイッチのテストです。
So what's this?
これは高温層といって温度の環境を作る試験装置です。低温はマイナス50度ぐらいといって温度の環境を作る試験装置です。低温はマイナス50度ぐらい、高温もプラス80度ぐらいまでこの中の環境を作れてです。
Apparently, they also connect a vacuum pump to it to simulate the pressure in space. Have you ever put food in there?
食べ物入れたことないですけど。
Finally, he gets a break. What's the most enjoyable part of working here?
そうですね。最近最終テストが続いてますけど、テストがうまくいくととても嬉しいですね。
So Takashi has another video conference. This is probably more than what he would have normally, but since staff are working remotely, it's the easiest way to communicate these days, especially when reviewing project documentation together.
So these days, a lot of meetings are done remotely, which they're doing right now, but it might take some time. So while they're doing that, let's explore the space. Pun intended.
This is a scaled model of the ELSA-D satellites. The blue wings are the solar panels which power the satellite itself, and the gold sheets around the center body works as heat insulation. The bottom magnet picks up the space debris, and once picked up, it shuttles it to a lower altitude in the atmosphere and burns them up both. And this one came before the ELSA-D, it's insulation, which power the satellite itself, and the gold sheets around the center body works as heat insulation. The bottom magnet picks up the space debris, and once picked up, it shuttles it to a lower altitude in the atmosphere and burns them up both. And this one came before the ELSA-D. Its job was to observe how much space debris was out there. Sensors that are housed inside catch small space debris, and then it estimates the total amount of space debris out there.
So I was actually planning to show you guys around this place, but a lot of the places I actually don't get access to. For example, right behind me is the MCC Mission Control Center, and they won't let me inside because there's top secret stuff going on there. But oh well, let's go find Takashi.
The building across the street is part of their office as well. I guess that's Tokyo real estate for you.
優先順位をですね、はい、見る方でつけました。
And now they have some time to prepare and discuss the tech.
はい、見る方でつけました。優先順位をですね、はい、見る方でつけました。
And now they have some time to prepare and discuss the technical points for the big meeting later this afternoon. Finally, lunchtime! They regularly eat at restaurants, but they're in a rush today to make their off-site afternoon meeting, so they decided to pick up lunch from the supermarket instead. Whoa! He got the soba and negi torodon set. Great choice! Now, Takashi and his colleague are heading out to meet Gitai, a space robotics company, to have a technical discussion about using their technology on future space debris removal projects. Wow! They're taking off their shoes before entering the office. This must be a very Japanese company. Since it's his colleague's first time meeting, they exchange meishi, also known as business cards, which is still a major part of Japanese business culture. There are certain manners on how to give and receive the cards, which is one of the first things you learn when you work in a Japanese company. For example, when there are multiple people like today, you exchange cards one by one in the order of the person with the highest position to the person with the lowest position. Oh, and it looks like they made a 3D printed model of the arm that they're working on. At this point though, it's probably classified information.
So this meeting looks like it's gonna take some time. Let's try to explore this place since we didn't get to explore Takashi's office. So just right behind me, it looks like they have a bunch of different spare parts to build everything. It's so cool. So this room is completely empty right now, and to be honest with you, I don't really know what's behind me, but it looks pretty interesting. Let me know in the comments if any of you know what it is or what it does.
Oh, that guy's working on something. Let's ask what he's doing.
ロボットを操縦するための装置があるんですけど、その装置の組み立てです。
Can you show me what the machine looks like? Oh wow, you have a working model and it's connected to VR goggles? Oh, it's controlling the robot over there. That's next level stuff. And of course, it can pick stuff up. Excuse me, can I ask what you're doing?
ロボットがソーラーパネルを組み立てるっていうタスクがあるんですけど、それの装置を設計しているところです。今これと同じものがそこのビショップっていう今ドームのモックの中に入っていて。
Can you show me? I see.
今ドームのモックの中に入っていて。
Can you show me? I see. The arm takes those pieces and puts them together like that. Well, that was unexpected, but I think it's time to go back to the meeting to see what's going on. Oh, perfect! Just in time. Looks like they're finishing up. Wow, that was quite long. So, are you going back to the office now? What's in the bag?
宿題とか鉛筆とかマスクとか体温計が入ってます。教室に入る前に測って記録します。
That's actually a Kumon bag for Keikun as he takes math. What's in the bag?
宿題とか鉛筆とかマスクとか体温計が入ってます。教室に入る前に測って記録します。
That's actually a Kumon bag for Keikun as he takes math and Japanese Kumon classes after his nursery school. Kumon schools originated in Japan to help supplement kids' education by giving them 30-minute assignments every day. Nice, he doesn't have a fever so he can go to the classroom. Keikun usually stays a bit longer, but because of the pandemic, he only gets his homework checked and then picks up new ones to minimize his stay there. Yay! Finally home! What are you gonna do now?
今日のメールのチェックしてます。
While Haruka prepares for dinner, Takashi does a little bit of work. So Takashi plays Tamiya mini 4-wheel drive race cars with Keikun when he has time. In fact, Takashi used to play with it when he was a kid, and just like Dad, Keikun is into cars and machines, so it's perfect for their father and son time. It's pretty amazing how he manages his work schedule and family time in Japan. Whoa, dinner's ready. That looks pretty good. And of course, dinner wouldn't start without Keikun's otoban-san. So after dinner and taking their baths, they all spend time by taking turns playing their favorite PS4 game together, Dragon Quest XI. So it looks like this is what they do at the end of the day. They're probably gonna finish off around 10 o'clock because that's when Kei goes to sleep. And then his parents will probably go to sleep around 12 o'clock. So that's pretty much a day in the life of a Japanese space engineer. Let me know what you guys thought in the comments. If you like this video, help me out and hit that like button. If you guys want to see what I'm doing on the daily, check out my Instagram account. And if you want to help support the channel, check out the Tokyo merch. And if you guys want to see more day in the life videos, hit that subscribe button and the bell button. And I'll catch you guys in the next one.
Design better projects faster with Envato Elements. Get unlimited downloads of beautiful and ready-to-use templates for your digital projects. Create more with premium design assets, video templates, mockups, fonts, presentations, photos, audio files, and more, all with commercial licenses for extra peace of mind. Envato Elements will make any project better while saving you time, effort, and money. Get unlimited downloads with Envato Elements and start creating today.
Hello everyone and welcome back to my journey of creating a city builder game from scratch using my own engine. This week I've got quite a few various little updates I want to get done, and I'm also going to be doing some work on the art style of the game. So in the last devlog video I was working on the save system, and that is now complete and working very nicely. Also recently I've been reshuffling some of the base systems in the game and tidying up some of the code just to make sure that I have a very solid foundation to start building up upon. This week, if we have a look in Trello, you can see that I've reached the final update of what I've been calling version 0.1. And this update is going to include quite a few miscellaneous, loose end, tidy up tasks that didn't really fit into any of the other categories nicely. So I'm going to get started now and I will show you what I'm working on in a bit. So I'm working on the first task of the day, which is to redo the camera movement. It's been annoying me for a while that you can only move the camera around using the arrow keys. I'd much prefer to be able to drag the world around using the mouse. So I've just implemented that, and I find that a lot easier to use, although you can still use the arrow keys if you prefer. Just about to stop for lunch now. For the rest of the morning I finished off the camera stuff, got the rotations working and the zooming in and out, and just generally made sure that the movement's all nice and smooth and as easy to use as it possibly can be. So that's all done now. I'll move on to the next task this afternoon. But first I'm just going to have a quick lunch and then maybe go for a run. It's a bit snowy, but I don't think it's too deep yet. The next thing I've been working on is the selection guide, which is this square that shows you which tile in the world you're currently selecting. Previously it just looked like this, a simple square, which I didn't really like. It didn't look very professional. So I did a bit of work in the shaders, some maths, and created a slightly nicer looking shape, a bit more of a rounded shape. And I also tried to smooth out its movement a bit, so that when you move from tile to tile, it doesn't instantly flick to the next tile. It actually has a slight sliding animation as it goes between tiles, which makes it feel a lot smoother to work with. Moving on to the next task now, which is going to be to set up a
Так это интересно, туда приехал, и тогда и поговорим. А зачем мне тогда, как говорить-то можно и так? А, ну да, ладно. Ладно, поговорим.
Simple debug system. I just want to have a simple panel in the game for me as the developer to give me some feedback about how the game's running, how the performance is, how many calculations and updates are happening per second, and then also maybe to give me a few options to toggle on like special debug views in the game. And I haven't got very far with that yet, so I've just got this panel which shows up when I press the tab key, but I'll be doing more work on that tomorrow. So I'm working on the debug stuff this morning. I've just set up a really simple debugging system in the code which allows any part of the code to report when a certain event happens to the debugger. So here in the Pathfinder, I'm reporting every time a pathfinding calculation takes place, and that then allows me to keep track of how often it's happening, and I can then display that information in the debugging panel. So I'm showing things like how often pathfinding calculations are happening, how many render calls are happening per frame, how many objects there are in the world, and then just a load of example values because I was testing out the layout. But as development goes on, I'll be displaying more and more values in here as I see necessary. Just added the first couple of options to the debugging panel. The first one is to show parking spaces, so when I turn that on I can see where all the parking spaces are and I can see whether they're reserved or not based on the colour. That's something I used loads when I was working on the cars, and I'm sure I'll use it a lot more in the future. And then the second option is to show the entity paths. So when I turn this on, you can see the path markers that the entities are currently following. So that's everything I want to do with the debugging system for now. I'm going to take a quick break from programming. I've got some herbs that I want to plant in the kitchen, and then I'll be back to work this afternoon. This afternoon I've been looking into multi-language support so that I can get the game translated into other languages, and this is something that I got really wrong with Equilinox. I waited way too long to start with the translations, and then there turned out to be so many issues with translating the game into other languages that in the end it just never happened. So I definitely don't want to make that mistake again, so I'm going to get started nice and early with the translations this time so that if any problems do arise, I've got plenty of time to sort them out. So my plan for the next few days is to do a bit more work on the art style of the game and to make some more decisions specifically about what the buildings in the game are going to look like and what architectural style they're going to have. So far I've just been trying out a mixture of styles, but I'd like to have a better idea of what they're actually going to look like in the finished game. So I think I'm going to look for a bit of inspiration this morning, try out a few different styles, and see if I can work out what would look best in the game. So here are a few houses that I've made this morning. I've been basing them mostly off English cottages because I thought that English cottages look quite cute and that might go well with the cute low poly art style that I'm going for with this game. And I think it works quite well, although I will try out a few different styles in a minute. I've also been learning a lot about how to model 3D houses because I've not really done much of that before, apart from the other houses that I've made in this game so far. So I've just been learning how to make different types of roofs and windows and doors. So I've just loaded up some of the houses into the game to see how they look, and I do like this style of house, but the colours are definitely looking a little bit dull and boring and needs a bit of livening up. Also, talking of colour, I need to implement a colour palette because what I've been doing so far is when I create these houses in Blender, I just choose the colours as I go individually for each house, and what I really should be doing is I should have a set colour palette which I then choose colours from. Not only would that then allow me to make sure that all the colours work well together, but it would also bring a bit more consistency into the colours of the game. For example, here you can see I've got like 3 slightly different colours for the windows of the houses, and same for the roofs. They're all meant to be the same colour, but they're all very slightly different. So I'm going to get a colour palette set up now. I can show you a really basic use of colour palette here. I've just created one very quickly in GIMP, and I've got that loaded up in Blender here. So when I'm creating the models, I can now just take the colours from the colour palette and use that in the model. So if I do that for all the models, obviously they're all going to have the same colours, which is what I want. The problem is, at some point in the future, I'm bound to want to tweak or change the colours in the colour palette for the game, and at the moment I'm only using the colour palette when creating the models. So if we have a look in one of the entity files for a house, which is what the game uses, the colours are all set in here. So if I ever want to change the colour palette for the game, I'd have to go through all of the existing entity files and update all of the colours one by one manually, which I definitely don't want to do. So what I need to do is to somehow link up these entity files with the colour palette itself, so that if I ever update the colour palette, the entities will automatically use the updated colour without me having to update any of the entity files. I've made a few changes so that the entity files can now reference colours in the colour palette. So for example, a lot of these buildings here are using the same colour for their roofs, which is this colour in the colour palette here. So if at any point I think actually the roofs would look better if they were a bit more of an orangey colour, I simply have to update the colour in the colour palette, and if I then relaunch the game, you can see that the roofs now all use that updated colour. And this is obviously going to make it really easy for me to play around with the colours as much as I want, to try out completely different colour palettes for the game, without having to update any of the entity files. So that's all good. Now it's time for dinner. I've been spending quite a bit more time in Blender just trying out a few different things, playing around with the art style, trying out different styles of trees and road, and trying out different colours, just trying to work out where I'm going with the art style for the game. Obviously I don't have to finalise the art style just yet, there's still plenty of time for that, but I just want to have a bit of a better idea of what direction I'm going in. And I think what I've got here I quite like now, so I think this is probably what I'm going to be aiming towards as I go forwards. But of course, please do let me know what you guys think. There's still loads of time to improve and change the art style before the game's finished, so I'd love to hear your thoughts and ideas. It is 9 o'clock and it's such a nice day today that I think we're actually going to be heading to the beach this morning, and then when I get back this afternoon I'm going to start editing this video. So I think that's pretty much going to be it for this week. I'm not too sure when the next devlog video is going to be out, because if you have a look at my Trello, the next tasks are all a little bit boring, lots of bug fixing and code tidying. So I think I'll wait until I've done all of that before I start making the next video. But the good news is that things should start to get a lot more interesting from now on, because basically everything I've been doing up until now, although it's taken absolutely ages, it's all basically been set up. But now that version 0.1 is done, or very close to being done, I can finally move on to the actual interesting parts and the gameplay. So very much looking forward to that. But for this week, that is going to be it. So thank you guys very much for watching this video. Do subscribe if you haven't already. Have a fantastic week, and I will see you all next time.
Смотри, это беспроводной пауэрбанк, который мы производим под своим брендом. Его себестоимость включает доставку 1000 рублей. А вот мы продаем его на топовых маркетплейсах: Озон, Беру, Валберес и другие. И самое приятное в том, что он продается на полном автомате. Независимо где я нахожусь, мне не нужно прикладывать никаких усилий, продажи идут сами собой. И ты можешь также. Если тебе интересно, кликай по кнопке, регистрируйся на мой предстоящий онлайн-мастер-класс по продажам на маркетплейсах, и ты сможешь запустить продажи на топовых маркетплейсах СНГ. На онлайн-мастер-классе я расскажу, во-первых, как выбрать правильный товар, который будет продаваться. Во-вторых, как его забрендировать, чтобы это был твой собственный бренд. В-третьих, как выйти на маркетплейсы и как запустить продажи, что нужно сделать, чтобы товар начал продаваться. И я поделюсь личным опытом, который поможет тебе избежать многих ошибок и сэкономит твое время. Поэтому кликай по кнопке, регистрируйся на онлайн-мастер-класс и увидимся. Действуй!
Сотрудники для тех, кто развивает бизнес. Для тех, кому важна скорость найма. Для тех, кто ценит простоту и прозрачность подбора. Для тех, кому нужно больше рабочих рук. Для тех, кто строит будущее. Сотрудники для вас на ХХРУ.
Hi, I'm Noah, and I'm an architectural designer and also a part-time indie game developer working on a pixel art game known as Chef RPG. Why is an architectural designer creating video games? Well, a few months ago, I had just graduated from architecture school and wasn't mentally prepared to join the workforce. I wanted to keep creating imaginative designs like we did in architecture studios, but architect interns starting in an office usually have very little say in the design of projects. I wanted to keep creating imaginative designs without the constraints of budget, clients, or even the corporate ladder. In the past, I've competed in many student architectural competitions, winning some prizes here and there. However, I ended up jumping from one competition to another, sometimes doing 4 competitions in the span of 2 months, but without much direction or sense of why I was doing them. I realized after a while that I just wanted to work on a single large project, one that I can put all of my design skills into, resulting in a product that many people could enjoy. Hence, I got the idea to create my own video game, which gives me an opportunity to create a fully unique game world. And that leads us to today. I've been learning to code for the past few months, and it's full steam ahead for the development of Chef RPG. For this video, I'm going to be creating a seaside town using architecture and urban design techniques and showing my design process along the way. I usually like to start with a sketch to kickstart a bunch of ideas. It usually doesn't matter what you draw, but it's super useful to draw something and have a base to start working from. I'm imagining a multi-level town surrounded by a forest facing the water. The town contains many branching paths leading to a variety of shops and activities. There will be a port area where a fish market and fishing boats will be located. So with this rough sketch, the first thing I want to do is determine primary circulation routes and the massing and function of buildings. It's important to determine a central route of travel, and it should pass through the town square. This route should be designed wider and will therefore be more obvious to the player. In urban design, it's important for these primary circulation points to connect to primary nodes of activity. In this case, the nodes will be the town center and the entrances to the other maps. Having secondary routes helps to create permeability and greater mobility in the town. In a city, you generally don't want to create a dead end in a public road unless it ends at a point of interest. So the same thing applies here. I played a lot of games where levels are designed with a lot of dead ends, often for no reason, and it usually kills some of the fun and that feeling of freedom. Another important aspect of good urban design is opening up the buildings up to the pedestrian realm. In a city, the most popular streets that pedestrians like to gather are the ones that are lined with shops and activities. The places that are not popular are streets alongside a big blank face of a building or uncontained plazas that are way too big. It's important for public spaces to have a permeable membrane where activities can happen on either side and where people can pass back and forth. For the design of this seaside town, it's important to line all of the pathways with shops and activities related to the game. This strategy helps to maximize liveliness and even player immersion. Finally, it's important to design the town based on constraints of the top-down view. Since this is a top-down 2D game, the player can only look at everything from one direction, and therefore you get into this weird situation where you never see the backs of any object. From the side, it would look like this. If you create anything with height and your player character walks behind it, your character would no longer be visible in this dead zone. Some games fade out buildings or objects to reveal the player, but I think this isn't the best solution. First of all, it just doesn't look good, especially if it's a big object, and second, you would still have all this dead space behind the object that isn't used for anything. My solution is to just design the map in a way that minimizes the amount of dead spaces that exist. For example, instead of having a flat surface, you can simply lift the ground up, and the dead zone is eliminated. This creates a cliff, which is a nice visual addition and adds some verticality to the scene. A second option is to add some lower objects in between to mitigate the dead space, like trees. In this case, the character will only be partially obstructed by smaller objects, but you would still be able to see the character. One last solution is to embed the building right into the ground. This also helps to add verticality to the scene and provide some interesting variety to the environment instead of having only freestanding buildings. With all of this in mind, I've decided that the town will be built on a hill, getting higher and higher towards the top of the map. Using hills and cliffs to improve visibility is an old level design technique used in games such as Pokemon and Final Fantasy. In these games, you can really see that there are an abundance of these instances, and everything is built on a mountain. Now that the massing and circulation are set and the functions are labeled, it's time to create some buildings. I'm not going to go into too much detail into the design process of each individual building, but I will talk about the general concept of each chunk of buildings and how I wanted them to relate and interact with the town as a whole. Because this is a rural town set in a sci-fi world, I'm going for a mixture of old and new architecture to show that element of technology encroaching into the countryside. I think I will use a mixture of both European and Asian architecture, much like the world design of a lot of Studio Ghibli films. Taking the bathhouse from Spirited Away as an example, the front of the building contains obvious Japanese architectural influences. However, if you look at the backside, it features an industrialist/steampunk aesthetic, and the interiors of this bathhouse contains elements of old European architecture. This combination of styles is really interesting and brings a dreamlike quality to this architecture. The architecture of Chef RPG will contain similar elements. However, because the game will be set roughly 40 years ahead in the future, the steampunk elements present in a lot of Studio Ghibli films will be traded in for cyberpunk-styled constructions. So less copper pipes and steam, and more robotics and neon lights. So we're going to start with the upper portion of the map where the market is located. These buildings will be taller and have shops all along the ground floor. 2 to 3 story buildings with shops on the ground and residents on the upper levels are sort of an ideal typology for creating engaging pedestrian spaces. Since this is a rural town, there's really no reason for any building to get any taller than this. I wanted to use a sci-fi style for these buildings, combined with some older stone buildings in the middle. This segment will contain the butcher shops, with the town square right in front. I felt here that it's better to just have open shops where your character can directly interact with the butcher, instead of creating another doorway and another room for each individual shop, because doing that would result in too many rooms, but more importantly, If there's a room for every single shop, it gets annoying for the player to have to go in and out of every building to buy all their ingredients and deal with potential load times each time. On top of that, I really just like the aesthetic of these tight and compact open market stalls. The market should really feel alive, so I'm just adding a selection of meats, sausages, and whatnot. Since these buildings are relatively large, when you're actually playing the game, you probably won't be able to see the entire building and the surrounding context. Creating as much detail as possible on this smaller scale really helps to bring the scene alive. On the right side of these three buildings will be a clock tower, followed by some veggie, fruit, and liquor shops. I decided to add an older brick cafe building here, and this could be a sort of tavern where the player can meet and interact with a lot of NPCs. Again, going for a mixture of building styles in this area. I wanted to show a messier, more organic side of the town, sort of contrasting with the higher end buildings on the left. Since this town is essentially one big market, big lit up signs are a must-have. Finally, adding a sidewalk helps to contain and mediate the buildings in the main square. This also helps to add a bit more color and variety to the scene. Here, I think it's really important to give the ground a bit of variety and texture to make it really worn and dirty. The worst thing that could happen is if everything looks really sterile. I decided to throw in a little brick in here for the cafe, although I don't know if this aesthetic will stay. Going back to the idea of the high-tech encroaching onto the traditional, some metal vents with blinking lights straddle this old structure, creating an interesting juxtaposition. And that's about it for the upper segment. Next, I wanted to create the center portion of the map, which links up with the market and town square. Starting on the right side, there's going to be apartments and general store for buying a variety of common ingredients. Here, I wanted to isolate the apartments on an elevated platform to divert away from the main path. On the right, I decided I want to add more shops instead of leaving an empty space here. I also just remembered that there needs to be a hair salon and some clothing stores. So a lower path alongside ground-embedded stone buildings fit this space really well. These will be facing the waterfront. Again, similar to the upper buildings, the ground level will feature shops and activities, and the second level will contain residences. I'm really trying to be careful how many doors I draw because it should really be a game where every door is accessible. This is really important when creating an open world RPG, and especially for 2D RPGs, where being able to access every door is essentially a given. At the boundary between the town and the water, I wanted to show that encroachment of corporate technology. The waterfront buildings are shielded from the water by this cyberpunk-style metal barrier. I'm playing around with the idea of this one corporation that supplies advanced infrastructure and energy to the game world. This could be one example of that. This metal barrier could help to protect the town from floods, as well as generating hydroelectricity. However, the town folks will forever have to live this reminder of the power and influence of these corporations. The final zone features the docks, which the fish markets will be located. I'm starting by setting up the wooden promenade, which leads to the center area, where the player can eventually have access to the fishing boats. I left a little dead end here, which could be an interesting spot for future story events. For the design of the buildings, I'm really inspired by Asian fish markets. Just the liveliness of them, all the color and energy. Now, I don't think it's really practical to create such a large market in this game, since it would just end up being a background with minimal function. I think 2 shops in this area is enough, and adding more would just drag out the gameplay. Imagine having to go through 10 different shops to buy all the seafood you need. So, trying to capture as much of the essence from some Asian fish markets, I started developing a similar aesthetic. I'm also creating a supply store and 2 booths for fish shops. Starting with a structure on the left, I wanted to mix it up here and use wood construction architecture to match with the docks. This also makes practical sense because heavier structures made of stone or metal would not be able to be supported by some wooden stilts. Markets like this typically look amazing at night because of all the lights and colors, so I'm making more spaces to put in some signs in the future. On the right side of this structure, I wanted to introduce that corporate technology element. I'm imagining this big metal machine latching onto the side of the building, almost like a parasite. To finish up the fish market, I wanted to throw in some colorful hanging lanterns just to bring in some more color and to provide light at night. These look good for now, but I think I will come back to this in the future and just bring in more lanterns and more neon signs. Really just trying to bring in as much life and energy into the market as possible. Going back to the upper segment, I wanted to add a couple more buildings on the outskirts of the town just to help balance the town out. I like the aesthetic of the wood buildings and the docks, so adding a couple houses on this edge balances the styles out over the map. A building I previously made was dropped on the right side of the map, which contains some shops and a crepe store. Now, after the 3 segments are put together, the whole map looks like this. So definitely getting there, but requires some finishing touches to really make this shine. One thing that needs work is the transition between the hardscape and the grass. A flat transition just doesn't look that good. So here I tried to create a nature taking over / post-apocalyptic look where nature is taking back the city. I think it looks comparatively better than a straight end. What I don't want is for this town to look really rigid. Even if the buildings themselves create a lot of straight lines, there are plenty of ways to create a bit of organicism and chaos in the scene. Jumping back to the docks, making the water look good is extremely important. I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but essentially I added a water line for animations, adding some reflections of the waterfront structures, and finally adding some wave textures of the water. Getting the water to look good in-game will be fairly difficult and will likely involve the use of shaders in combination with animations. Here's the cyberpunk style fishing vessel from the previous video. Just implemented a quick waterline and some underwater shading. Animations will eventually need to be added to this as well. Architecture and cities do not exist in isolation, and their contrast with their surroundings are really what makes built forms unique. So to really bring this scene together, I'm finishing up all of the surrounding landscape and dropping in some trees. I don't have too many preferences except to just create a good variety of randomness in the landscape. The wilder the landscape looks, the better, so this may need some changes in the future to achieve that. It'd be really cool for this to end up a semi-sci-fi village sitting in the middle of a rugged and wild landscape. Because Chef RPG has an active time and season system, I'm going to create a fall version of this map, because everything just looks better in the fall. It's a fairly simple process of selecting color ranges on certain layers and changing the hue until it reaches a color that you like. And there you go, the town is finally complete. I think it looks pretty good at a distance, though I have some slight concerns over close-ups of certain areas. So some of these areas may need to be revamped in the future. Finally, I'm going to just import all of this into Unity and we can take an in-game walkthrough to see how it feels. So here we are in Unity. I'm currently just placing some tree prefabs I made earlier and dropping them into the scene. Animations and season change scripts have already been added to these trees, so it's really just a simple matter of dropping them into the map. Here I'm creating a series of polygon colliders in the map so that your character won't just walk off the map and won't be walking up walls. So after a couple more adjustments in Unity, the map is now at a working state. For now, I'm going to jump back into the coding side of things and really push the cooking gameplay to a working state. Really looking forward to show you guys the restaurant gameplay when it's ready. I'm going to leave you guys with a quick in-game walkthrough. For now, I dropped in some randomly generated NPCs with a basic AI so that they can walk around town. With some people walking around a town, we can get a general feel for the town's atmosphere. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching and see you next time.
I'm using what would be a straight line, making it imperfect, to say, hey, there's a disturbance in this flat shape, and it is in the shape of wood grains. And that's all you really need to get that impression. Hey guys, welcome to pretty much the first tutorial that I'm going to be producing that covers something that is directly for Insignia, my game, and is something that I'm working on right now, basically covering my process on how I approach architecture. I had a brief for myself in the game that there was going to be a pub or a tavern or an inn in every chapter of the game. So every major city has one of these places, like a bar. And in this second chapter, a lot of the architecture is much more diverse. It's more of an urban environment, so things are more clustered in general. And it has sort of more character as a city. So this originally started as, I had built like a series of buildings, and this one here, I really like the shape of. I came up with this idea that some of these buildings would have like second stories that were built after the fact, and then like a little balcony, just to give some diversity of shape. And I wanted to run with that concept for the pub. And I was thinking about the space considerations that I needed for the things that were going to be in the pub. That's, you know, the barman and quest givers that are sitting down in the pub, that kind of thing. So I was playing around with the basic shape here in Leonardo, the sketching app that I use. And I came to this point where I had like a lot of sort of horizontal space that I created, and I still wanted that second story, and I wanted to play with this idea of a balcony. And eventually I came up with a design like this one, and thought that it looked kind of like a shoe. So this is called the Shoe Inn. It has a few basic things that I needed, and then I used references to sort of pad out the rest of it. So I had a lot of references that went into this. Most of them were Irish pubs, but also just the shape of a shoe that I wanted to sort of at least hint at, with more than just the L shape of the building. So one of those things, this is the ground level here, so this is ground. One of those is this heel that's here that steps down into the rest of the shoe. You can't really see it, but it's like this area here, and then it comes down, and then it's like a gutter or like a skirting around the building that makes it look a little bit more like a shoe. This, basically, right? I also have this idea of like the flap over the boot, and you could think of that as, you know, either the pitched roof here or this sort of like tent window structure coming off the side. Then for like the actual pub itself, the decorations, we're going to be going for something that's an Irish pub. I looked at a lot of these references for ideas about how to decorate it and how the entrance would look like. Flower boxes are very, very common in the UK and Ireland. So that's something that you see a lot of here, and was a clear reference for these buildings in general. So a lot of them have flower boxes and have that Tudor style. The next thing was, you know, other sort of decorations you see out the front, so barrels, very common. Signs or like little stands for menus and things like that. I also had this idea that I wanted, this is something that we have in Australia. I don't know if this is common anywhere else in the world, but we have this basically cellar sort of setup where the delivery van that comes and brings the alcohol, I mean, I imagine this isn't Australian, so, or maybe it is, I can't really tell. The van that delivers the alcohol drops it off in the cellar rather than having to take it upstairs or bring it into the premises. So I have this idea of there being like a little side window cellar here. So we're going to be focusing on the exterior today, and maybe in another tutorial we can do the interior. This is kind of the reference point for the architecture for a lot of the game. I want to talk you very quickly through sort of what my references are and what I'm looking at. As I said previously, this is sort of like a Tudor house or a Tudor architecture style. What that means is a lot of timber, a lot of stucco on the outside of the buildings. We've got tiles on top. Having the second story be like overhanging the first story. So here's an example of something that I've already created in this style recently. This is a sort of redux of Armin's house. You can see I've still got the, you know, light sort of stucco exterior, We've got those timber frames bordering the building. We've got the windows built into the frame. I have these rounded decorative sort of timber designs here to give it a bit more warmth. And you can see that in general, like, this is quite caricatured. It's quite small compared to what you would expect. A lot of these measurements are a lot bigger than they would be to make it more sort of chibi. So the thickness of this tile, of this edge here, is much thicker than what you'd expect tiles to be. It makes it feel more like a toy house. You know, it makes sense that there would be a little bit of bowing, maybe, but I think having it be so much, so dramatic here gives us a more homely feel. It makes it feel more like it was made by someone who's not a robot, which when you're producing pixel art is quite difficult to do because there's such a temptation to stay within the lines. Let's approach building this building. What I want to do first is make sure that it will fit inside of the scope of everything else in the game. So I'm going to now just draw like the basic shape for the building, and I'm going to keep faith with this first story and then the second story. I kind of want it to be a focal point when you're walking down the street. I do want it to stand out from the others, so I'm going to break one of these lines to make it a little taller and a little more grandiose than the other buildings. I think what I'll do is I want to emphasize the front door, which is going to be something like here, because I want you to really see that. And that means I'm going to put the building on a little bit of an angle where its facade is facing the camera a little bit more than the others. And again, as usual, I'm using colors here that, you know, aren't fully representative of what I would be using, but that's kind of on purpose, right? It's definitely on purpose. Because I haven't made that choice yet about what colors I'm using. I'm just using some nice clear colors that will help me understand the shapes a bit better. There were a few other things, right? We wanted this to be called the shoe in. So at this point, remember talking about silhouettes? I really want to make sure that you can tell that this is a shoe, or at least once you know that it's called the shoe in, that you can understand, oh yeah, it does look like a shoe. So that heel that I was talking about before and the step in the sole, that is, it's really important to get those right now because they are quite literally architectural elements. I want to make sure that I am keeping faith with that organic approach that I was referring to earlier. And what that means is basically to avoid dead straight lines.
Эффективная работа снабжения – это залог успешного развития компании. Каждый рубль, сохраненный на закупках, идет в прибыль. Автоматизация снабжения – это дорого и сложно? Специально для малого и среднего бизнеса мы создали доступный облачный сервис Mertago. Используя Mertago, вы сделаете работу снабжения эффективной. На 80% снижение трудозатрат. Автоматизируйте выбор поставщиков, отправку запросов и предложений. Упростите планирование оплат поставщикам и контроль отгрузок. Сократите расходы.
In this video, I'm going to share with you guys my top 10 things you guys should know before coming to Japan. As some of you guys already know, I've lived in Japan for more than 15 years, and that I live in the center of it all, here in Shibuya. But when I first came to Japan from the US, there's so many things that I didn't know or understand. So in this video, I wanted to share with you guys the top 10 things that I wish someone told me before I came here. And let me know in the comment section if you find any of the things that I mentioned in the video kind of weird. And if you want to help support the channel, check out my Tokyo merch. I'll leave a link below. Let's get started. So first thing, let's talk about cash in Japan. Probably coming from a lot of modern countries, you think that you can use credit cards because, you know, you think Japan is a modern country itself. But what you'll find is that a lot of places here in Japan won't accept credit cards. Strange, right? I mean, who really wants to carry around cash in their pocket all the time? But the reality is, in Japan, a lot of people still carry around cash. In fact, I probably have $10,000, $20,000 in my pocket at any given time just because I have to use cash so much. But before I get into all of the places that don't, in fact, I probably have $10,000, $20,000 in my pocket at any given time just because I have to use cash so much. But before I get into all of the places that don't accept credit cards, let me share with you some places that do. Major department stores or retailers, mid to upper end restaurants, convenience stores, amusement parks, airports. Now some shops that probably don't accept credit cards are small mom and pop restaurants, local bars, street food vendors, a lot of restaurants who serve set meals during lunchtime, small retailers, and some taxis. Although more and more are accepting credit meals during lunchtime, small retailers and some taxis. Although more and more are accepting credit cards these days. Even some fast food places don't take credit cards, so you should be careful. Also, if you're planning to travel outside of the city, be prepared to bring enough cash because it's even more likely for places not to accept credit cards. As a local tip, I find that my Visa card is accepted at most places, while sometimes my American Express is hit and miss. Also, if you want to minimize carrying cash around, you can get a Suica card or a Pasmo card. It costs about 500 yen and you can load it up to 20,000 yen in cash, so you can use it at a lot of places, but mainly it's used for train stations. So you don't need to buy a ticket each time when you get to the train, and it automatically calculates the fare when you get out. Just tap in and then tap out. But you can also use it at convenience stores, many street vending machines, taxis, train kiosks, some restaurants, shops, and even electronic stores like Big Camera accept it. Now, if you're looking to withdraw cash in Japan, I suggest Sberbank ATM, Japan Post ATMs, and Prestia Bank, as they are best at handling foreign cards. So eating and drinking while walking on the street. So in many respects, it's considered bad manners to walk and eat at the same time, even if you get food on the go like sandwiches or onigiris. This rule may sound weird to you, but for Japanese people, eating a sandwich is the same as eating a big bowl of pasta while walking. Yeah, weird. If you want to eat or drink in public, the best thing to do is stop and chill on the side of the street. But all in all, walking and eating won't get you in trouble, but people will stare at you and look at you as if you were brought up badly. Or maybe even the older generation actually will say something to you. But there's always exceptions to the rule, and one of those exceptions is tabe aruki spots. Tabe aruki means to eat and walk. So these are places like Tsukiji Fish Market. These places are intended for people to buy food and eat on the street, and as it's named in Japanese, okay to walk to. But one thing you should know is that even in these areas, some shops don't allow you to walk and eat. But it should say on the storefront just to let you know. Festivals are another exception. And as more shops like Starbucks offer to-go items like coffee, you'll see more and more Japanese people walking around with coffee cups in their hand, ultimately changing the culture of Japan. The real issue why it's thought of as bad manners in Japan is because it's considered meiwaku, which means it bothers other people. People here are sensitive with strong food smells, and it would be the worst if you spill food or drinks on them by accident. But there's all types of people in Japan. I'm sure you guys have that one friend or family member that's more easily bothered by the slightest thing. Depending on who you ask, it may be different. So what I can tell you is, if you're really not sure what to do and you're kind of confused, just stop walking if you're eating. So drinking in Japan.
Create professional and beautiful videos faster with Envato Elements.
The drinking age here is 20 years old. I was so surprised when I first came here. I was like, wow, you can actually drink here at 20 years old? So you can literally go to any convenience store and they'll sell you alcohol and not ask you how old you are if you just look like you're 20 years old. In fact, there are still beer vending machines on streets, in hotels, etc. They don't even require any proof of age. But recently in Japan, they've made it a little bit more strict. Let me show you. I select my beer, I go to the counter, the clerks scan the drink, and the register screens and asks if I'm over 20 years old. I tap yes, I pay, and I'm all good to go. What do you guys think? Too strict? Too easy? How is it in your country? So let's talk about tattoos at the onsen. Japanese onsens, aka hot springs, are one of the coolest experiences you can have in Japan. Unfortunately, many Japanese onsen prohibit people with tattoos from entering the facility because of the stigma associated with tattoos in Japan. Yakuza, or also known as organized crime, are known to have characteristic irezumi, also known as tattoos. Since a lot of these onsen